The foremost aim of voyage planning is to be in the right place at the right time. Hence, when planning an ocean crossing, the most important thing is to make the best use of favorable winds and weather conditions by choosing the season and route that will minimize the risk of encountering bad weather. For an Atlantic crossing east to west, a yacht sails in the trade wind, which are generally east northeast. But let's start by talking about the mechanism that creates the trade winds, because that same mechanism will get a yacht back to Europe again. The mechanism that dictates the weather pattern in the North Atlantic is the Azores High, sometimes called the Atlantic High or the Bermuda High. For a high in the northern hemisphere, the wind circulates clockwise around the high. We will have westerlies to the north and easterlies to the south. To cross the Atlantic and back, the skipper needs to know how to navigate the Azores High. For a sailing yacht, an east-west crossing is pretty straightforward, as it's below the Azores High, where the trade winds are very stable in the wintertime. In the summertime, the trade winds are disturbed by storms and hurricanes. For a west-east crossing back to Europe, it's a lot more complicated. Firstly, a yacht has to get across the transit area called the horse latitudes. It is called so because in the old days, if a ship got becalmed, they would throw the horses overboard to preserve water. After getting across the horse latitudes, then one gets into the westerlies. If there was only the Atlantic high, then the westerlies would be steady like the easterly trade winds. The westerlies are affected by the jet stream, which is the path of the low pressure systems coming from North America. The jet stream shifts the Azores high north or south, which disrupts the flow of the westerlies. Let's look at routing strategies and timings for an east-west crossing. This is the typical weather picture from windy in December. Here we have Portugal, Canary Islands, Cape Verde Islands, and Tobago. For an east-west crossing, there is a much bigger window to cross as the Azores High is well established with no hurricanes. A yacht can have a nice easy passage anytime from November to May. Most vessels leave the Canary Islands in November or early December as they want to spend Christmas in the Caribbean and maximize their cruising time there as the season is relatively short. The Ark, one of the biggest rallies for cruisers, are leaving Gran Canaria end of November. I highly recommend to plan your arrival to the Canary Islands after they have left. An alternative is to spend November exploring the western islands, La Palma, El Hierro, and La Gomera. These islands have so much to offer in stunning landscape, hiking, with no tourists. We did that before our Atlantic crossing. We spent November and part of December exploring the Western Isles, coming back to Tenerife for provisioning mid-December. The route from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean is 2,700 nautical miles, starting by going south until the trade wind has fully established, then heading west about 3 weeks of downwind sailing until you make landfall on your island of choice in the Caribbean. The alternative route is to head south and stop at the Cape Verde Islands. The Cape Verde Islands has become an attractive cruising destination in its own right. Main attraction is stark beauty, simplicity of life, and a taste of Africa. The passage from Canary Islands to Cape Verde is 800 nautical miles, 5 to 7 days of sailing with some motoring expected. I suggest to make landfall at Sal, then explore the northern islands for a week or so before heading to Mindelo for provisioning and preparation for the Atlantic crossing. Crossing the Atlantic from Cape Verde to the Caribbean is a passage of 2,100 nautical miles. which is going to take you about 2 weeks with a few jibes. If you're only staying one season in the Caribbean, I recommend to make landfall in the southernmost island, like Tobago. That way, you will not cover the same ground before you cross back to Europe. The return crossing to Europe is much harder. If one draws a line from the Caribbean to the Azores, it goes through the Atlantic High. Only a powerboat or superyacht with plenty of fuel would take this route as it is flat calm. The route for a sailing yacht is to go north towards Bermuda, across the horse latitudes, then turn east on top of the Atlantic High and across to the Azores. That is the general strategy to get back to Europe. The season to go back to Europe is a much smaller window. If you're on a yacht in the Caribbean, you find yourself between a rock and a hard place. If you leave too early, you are likely to encounter heavy weather and even a gale, which is coming from the back end of the North American winter season. Temperatures will also drop, and you will get much colder weather as you sail in much higher latitudes, sometimes as far north as 40 degrees. If you leave it too late, then you get into the hurricane season, and you don't want to be at the high seas with nowhere to hide when there's a hurricane nearby. So a west-east crossing is much harder as you have a smaller window to navigate a much bigger transition zone, the horse latitudes. Add to the challenge, you have to deal with a very volatile weather system, calms, changing wind directions, and the potential for storms. Before I show you an alternative and awesome route back to Europe via Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, let's do a quick recap. The east-west crossing is a trade-wind ocean passage starting from Canary Islands between November and April. The non-stop route from the Canary Islands to the Caribbean is 2,700 nautical miles, and the route via the Cape Verde is 800 nautical miles south to the Cape Verde Islands, then an ocean crossing of 2,100 nautical miles to the Caribbean. The west to east crossing is harder. It starts in the Caribbean going north across the calm horse latitudes to Bermuda. Stopping in Bermuda is optional. Lots of history, but be aware, both fuel and provisions are very expensive. As you pass Bermuda, be careful not to cut the corner too early, as you may get caught in the calms of the Azores High on your way east to the Azores Islands. The seasonal window to do this crossing is late April until beginning of June. The alternative route for a west-east crossing is to head north from Bermuda to Nova Scotia, then sail along the coast to Newfoundland. From Newfoundland to Azores, it's only an ocean crossing of 1,250 nautical miles, 7 to 8 days. What makes this route amazing is that you get nearly 2 months to cruise one of the top cruising areas in the world, Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Explore secluded anchorages, magnificent fjords, and small fishing communities, and expect lots of wildlife. This is truly a world-class cruising destination. The best time to do this crossing from Newfoundland to Azores is July to early August. Expect a swift passage riding behind a low most of the way to the Azores. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you at the high seas.